Pain may touch us once. Suffering is what happens when the mind returns to the wound and keeps pressing it, asking it to explain who we are, what we lost, and why life should not have happened this way. The body feels the first sting. The mind can create the second one for months, even years. The Buddha did not teach that a wise person never feels pain. That would not be honest. A body can ache, a heart can grieve. A sentence can land in the chest and make the breath stop for a moment. But he pointed to a quieter danger. After pain appears, the mind often reaches for another arrow. There is the first contact, and then there is the story. There is the unpleasant feeling, and then there is the demand that it must not be here. There is the wound, and then there is the old grip that refuses to let experience remain simple. The difference between pain and suffering is not only a Buddhist idea. It is something we can see in the smallest ordinary moments. A cold reply, a tired body, a memory at the edge of sleep. The real question is not only, why does this hurt? It is, what is my mind doing with the hurt? Someone answers you with a colder tone than usual. Nothing dramatic has happened yet. Just a sentence, just a pause, maybe a face that did not soften when you hoped it would. But before you have fully understood what happened, the body already knows something. The chest tightens, the throat closes, the hand grows still on the edge of the table. This is the first arrow. In the Buddha's teaching, feeling does not appear from nowhere. It arises when life makes contact with the senses. The ear meets a sound. The body meets a touch. The mind meets a memory. From that contact, a feeling appears, pleasant, unpleasant, or neither. This first movement is not moral failure. It is not proof that you are weak. It is not evidence that your practice has disappeared. Pain is the contact. Suffering is the conclusion. The mind draws too quickly. A word was spoken, and pain appeared. But then the mind says, they do not respect me. A message was ignored, and pain appeared. But then the mind says, I am not important. The body is tired, and pain appears. But then the mind says, I am falling behind. I will never be okay. Something is wrong with me. The first arrow enters through life. The second arrow enters through interpretation. I have watched this in myself. Sometimes the original pain was small, but the story I built around it was enormous. A brief disappointment became a prophecy. A criticism became a mirror I was afraid to look away from. A lonely hour became proof that loneliness was my nature. The pain touched once. The mind returned to it, as if returning would finally make it explain itself. This is why the Buddha's teaching is so precise. He does not ask us to pretend the first arrow did not land. Aging hurts. Illness hurts. Separation hurts. Harsh words hurt. The path begins with honesty, not denial. There is dukkha, pressure, vulnerability, unsatisfactoriness in conditioned life. But the first arrow is not the whole suffering. It is the beginning of experience. The heaviness grows when the mind takes the pain and makes it into a self, a future, a permanent verdict. Pain says, this is unpleasant. Suffering says, this is who I am now. The first practice is very small, before fixing the pain, before blaming anyone. Before explaining your whole life through one moment, pause and name what is actually here. Tightness, heat, sadness, fear. Remembering. wanting. The first arrow may already be present, but the second does not have to be picked up. But the first arrow is only the beginning. The deeper suffering begins when the mind starts asking reality to become different. Craving is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers, "This should not have happened to me." Sometimes it sounds reasonable. It sounds like closure. It sounds like memory. It sounds like the simple wish that someone would finally understand exactly what they did. After pain appears, the mind does not usually say, "I am craving now." It says, "I just need an apology." It says, "I need them to admit it." It says, "I need the past to be different before I can be at peace." The old grip returns to the sore place. Not because it enjoys the pain, but because it believes that pressing harder will somehow make reality answer. This is one of the most human places in the whole path. Nobody wants grief. Nobody wants betrayal. Nobody wants the body to ache in the middle of the night while the ceiling looks too still. When pain is deep, the wish to escape it can feel innocent. I have mistaken craving for care before. I thought I was trying to heal, but I was really asking life to rewrite itself so I would not have to feel the loss. In the Buddha's teaching, craving is not measured by how reasonable it sounds. It is known by what it does to the heart. Does it loosen suffering, or does it keep feeding it? Does it lead to clarity, or does it return the mind to the same burning place again and again? Craving does not only want pleasure, it wants painful feeling to vanish before it has been understood. It wants pleasant feeling to stay after its conditions have changed. It wants neutral life to become exciting enough to hold. It wants the world to obey the shape of our fear. Pain is what happened. Suffering is the contract. The mind signs with the demand that it must not have happened. This does not mean we should become passive. Caring for pain is wise. We may rest, seek help, set a boundary, speak truth, take medicine, apologize, or leave a harmful situation. The Dhamma does not ask us to love pain or excuse harm. It asks us to see the extra thirst that wraps around pain and turns it into an endless argument with reality. There is a difference between caring for the wound and pressing it to prove it is real. Caring is gentle. It feels the body. It asks what is needed. It chooses the next action carefully. Craving is tighter. It replays the same sentence. It argues with someone who is no longer in the room. It checks the old message again. It keeps demanding that the past become a different past. When craving enters the room, pain becomes a negotiation with the impossible. The body may hurt once, but the mind hurts again each time it says, "This cannot be allowed to be true." And until that thirst is seen, the second arrow remains close enough to be chosen. And when that demand stays long enough, pain no longer feels like something we are experiencing. It begins to feel like someone we are. At first, there is pain. Then there is the memory of pain. Then there is the role built around pain. The betrayed one, the unwanted one, the one who never gets chosen, the one who must never trust again. Slowly, a wound becomes more than something that happened. It becomes the place from which the whole world is interpreted. A person sits at a wooden table after being criticized. The room is ordinary. A cup of tea goes cold. Outside, a gate closes with a small metal sound. But inside, The mind is building a house from one unpleasant moment. I am not respected. I am always misunderstood. I have to defend myself. The criticism may have lasted 10 seconds. The identity formed around it may last for years. At this point, the Buddha's teaching on non-self stops being abstract. It becomes almost merciful. Non-self does not mean your pain is fake. It does not mean nothing matters. It does not mean you should become cold, detached, or indifferent. It means that what we call I is often being assembled from changing processes. Body, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These arise. They shift. They depend on conditions. They are not solid enough to be owned the way clinging wants to own them. When pain arises, perception names it. Memory connects it to the past. Thought explains it. Emotion colors it. The body reacts. Consciousness knows it. Then ignorance gathers all of this and says, "This is me." That moment is heavy. Pain says, "There is unpleasant feeling." Suffering says, "I am this unpleasant feeling." Pain says, "Something difficult is present." Suffering says, "My whole life is defined by this." Pain says, "This wound needs care." Suffering says, "This wound is my name." I have held on to certain hurts because they gave me a strange sense of shape. Without them, I did not know what story to tell about myself. Letting go felt less like peace and more like losing an old identity, even one that had made me tired. That is why some suffering survives long after the original pain has changed. The mind keeps feeding it because familiarity can feel safer than freedom. A wound can be real without becoming an identity. This sentence matters. It protects the heart from two extremes. One extreme denies pain and says, "It should not hurt." The other extreme clings to pain and says, "Because it hurt, it must define me." The Dhamma walks a quieter road. It asks us to know pain clearly without turning it into a permanent self. This is a memory, not a prison. This is a feeling, not a command. This is a thought, not a final truth. This is a wound that may need tenderness. But it does not have to become the house where the mind spends the rest of its life. When the self is no longer built around the wound, pain may still need time, but suffering loses its throne. This is why the next step is not to fight the self-image, but to see it forming before it hardens. Mindfulness is often sold as comfort, but in the Buddha's path it is more demanding than comfort. It is a clear lamp held close enough to show what pain is becoming inside the mind. Sometimes that seeing is peaceful. Sometimes it is uncomfortable, because it reveals the exact moment we are about to add suffering. Imagine sitting on the edge of a bed with a phone in your hand. A message has hurt you. The reply is already forming. It is sharp. It is clever. It feels deserved. The thumb hovers over the screen. The jaw is tight. The breath is short. The body is not only feeling pain now, it is preparing to turn pain into action. Mindfulness does not remove the first arrow. It reveals the moment your hand reaches for the second. In that moment, practice is not dramatic. It may sound like this inside the mind. Hurt is here. Heat is here. The wish to strike back is here. The second arrow is in my hand, not as a performance, not as a spiritual pose, just as honest knowing. This is close to the heart of early Buddhist practice. The breath is known as breath. The body is known as body. Feeling is known as feeling. A thought is known as thought. An urge is known as an urge. When these are seen clearly, they do not have to become a whole world. Then the chain can be seen while it is still forming. Something has touched the mind. Feeling has appeared. The old thirst is leaning forward. The grip has not fully closed yet. Suffering has not become complete. This is not only a doctrine to memorize. It can happen in 1 minute. It can happen while you reread a message that already hurt you. It can happen while you lie awake and argue with someone who is asleep in another house. It can happen while grief rises and the mind begins to say, "My life will always be like this." Mindfulness creates a small space in the chain. The pain may still be there, but the mind no longer has to obey every urge born from it. You can feel fear without feeding fear. You can feel anger without giving anger your mouth. You can feel grief without turning grief into a prophecy. I used to think calm was the proof of practice. Now I think honesty may be closer. To sit with the ache in the chest and say, "This is unpleasant." To feel the grip wanting to tighten and not pretend otherwise. To know the urge before becoming the urge. That is not weakness. That is the beginning of wisdom. Pain may still knock. Mindfulness does not hand it the whole house. It lights the room, shows the movement of the mind, and gives the heart one quiet chance not to deepen what already hurts. Once the reaching is seen, the path becomes very small, very ordinary, and very real. There is a moment before suffering becomes complete. It is small, almost invisible. The breath catches, a thought rises, the hand tightens, the mouth prepares a reply. Something inside wants to grab the pain and turn it into reaction. This moment is where the path becomes real. The Buddha's way is not built on arranging the world so perfectly that nothing painful ever reaches us. That would be impossible. The body will age. People will misunderstand us. Plans will break. Loved ones will leave. The weather of life will not ask for our approval. But there is another kind of freedom, not the freedom from ever being touched, but the freedom not to be ruled by what touches us. The person who is free is not the person who never hurts. It is the person who can feel hurt without immediately becoming harmful. Restraint is not weakness here. It is the moment wisdom protects the heart from obeying pain blindly. This does not mean silence at any cost. If there is harm, we may need to act. If the body is ill, we may need treatment. If a relationship is unsafe, we may need distance. If a mistake has been made, we may need to repair it. The difference is whether action comes from clear seeing or from the second arrow. Reaction says, "Because I hurt, I am allowed to hurt back." Clear seeing says, "Because I hurt, I must be careful with what I plant." This is also where karma becomes very practical, not as punishment, but as intention taking shape. The question is not, what hidden force is waiting to strike me? The question is much closer. What is this mind planting now? Is this word rooted in greed, hatred, or delusion? Or is it moving toward non-harming, clarity, and release? A person standing at the edge of anger can feel the whole body become a weapon. The eyes narrow. The shoulders lift. The tongue prepares the sentence that will win and wound at the same time. I used to think the first sharp reply was honesty. Later, I saw that sometimes it was only pain borrowing my mouth. Freedom may look very small here. One unsent message, one slower breath, one step away from the doorway, one sentence not spoken until the mind can speak without poison. One hand opening instead of tightening around the old arrow. That small restraint is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is the place where suffering stops multiplying. Pain may be unavoidable in this conditioned life, but the second arrow does not have to become our habit. Again and again, the path begins in the same quiet place, knowing the feeling, seeing the craving, loosening the grip, and choosing the next action with care. The arrow may still be there. The place it touched may still ache. The memory may still return when the room grows quiet. When a familiar name appears on the screen, or when one sentence makes your face grow warm before you can explain why. The Buddha's path does not ask you to lie about that. The old ache does not have to disappear before wisdom begins. But the hand can soften. The mind can stop returning to the sore place as if pressing it will finally make the past change. It can stop asking the old ache to become an identity, a verdict, a weapon, or a reason to plant more pain. The first arrow may have come through life. The second arrow does not have to come through you. Maybe it will happen while your thumb is above the screen. Maybe while your chest tightens after a cold reply. Maybe while an old memory asks you to become the old version of yourself again. The next time pain arises, do not first ask, "How do I make this disappear?" Ask quietly, "Am I feeling this pain? Or am I feeding the second arrow?" Feel the breath at the throat. Notice the heat in the face. Watch the old story reach for your hand. Then wait one moment longer than usual. That moment is small, but it is not empty. It is where craving can be seen before it becomes clinging. It is where anger can be known before it becomes speech. It is where pain can remain pain without being promoted into a self. Not every old ache can be closed today, but not every sore place has to be pressed today. And sometimes, the first quiet sign of freedom is not that the pain has disappeared, but that your own hand has stopped making it deeper. Write this in the comments. I will feel the pain without feeding the second arrow. Then take one honest breath before your next reaction. The path does not begin when pain disappears. It begins when the mind stops adding another wound to what life has already touched. Let the breath be simple. Let the feeling be known. Let the old arrow stay on the ground.